How did you come up with the idea for the basement? You said that the narrative self-edits based on how it is read. What do you mean by how it is read?
I give that to Damon.
Okay, so the text has options. Like it can go multiple ways. It's not like some sort of algorithmic thing which did just some sort of statistical analysis. Jeremy very carefully, I basically gave him a formal grammar he could write within, so he could sort of choose options and things. So he actually wrote all of it. It's not like just I fed it in a Markov chain, stuff happened, and then glop comes out the other end. Like it's all written by Jeremy. All of them handcrafted artisanal words by a real author. But it can go different ways, so it can make choices on it. The idea is that each time it's read a particular way that reinforces. If you read it sort of straight through, that reading sort of gets strengthened. The odds of that reading coming up again goes up. If you make jumps around inside of, though, you break it, you basically go back to check something earlier because that doesn't seem to make sense to you. It can then sort of reflip the coins on what those choices were. The choices were all picked by Jeremy, so it's not just totally going randomly. But it's not like a choose your own adventure kind of thing either. So we wanted it to be written very carefully, someone actually writing all the stuff for it. But it's kind of like when you tell a story. You can tell the same story multiple ways, and then when you tell stories, they change. Getting that kind of aspect of it into the written part of it, like it's a written story, and usually when like you hear like the written word, it's like oh, that's the final account of it. This each time it gets told, it kind of tells itself a slightly different way, so it can change. Especially when you start trying, things don't add up, and you go back and try to look at stuff earlier. That kind of reshuffles things. So when there are kind of like complicated parts about the story, I don't want to give away some of the stuff in it, but there are some things where you may be like, yeah, read it yourself. Like you'll be like, wait a second, you go back, and then you might be able to. It's like if you ask somebody the same story multiple times, they're likely to give it to you a slightly different way depending on how they're telling to you or the mood they're in or whatever.
Psychological.
Yeah,
It's
trying to get.
like when the train of, like how a rumor starts. By the time it starts with here, it's really simple. By the time it comes down here, it's completely salacious and all wrong.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yours is much nicer.
or you can actually look at it. I mean, if you go to like therapy or something like that, like they ask you the same questions over and over again to try to get at the real heart of an issue. So it could become more accurate by being retold. Like it's not
Okay.
just like that it loses something. In fact, some of it gains and it gains something in the translation.
Okay.
I think. So like the act of reading brings out stuff that you wouldn't get on your first pass through. So.
Okay.
Can I tag two things in here?
Absolutely.
With
Please.
my glowing background. Okay. So, one is a quick story. So, many years ago, my family had I think it was a Christmas dinner, and no, it's worse. Okay, we had a Christmas dinner, and I had an uncle from Mexico that was an oceanographer, and he brought a friend that was a nuclear physicist, as I remember, and he only spoke Spanish. And I have cousins that are half Mexican, and my uncle was from Mexico, but it's a huge table. And then the other side of the table, I have a distant relative who he's now a very secretive older man who works for a Rand corporation. He's in a think tank in retirement, and he brought a friend who's a nuclear physicist. And the entire night, we're trying to translate from one physicist, 20 people down a giant table with pie and coffee and presents being opened and kids screaming, to Spanish and back. And each time you see the end of the table, they go, what? Because it just didn't make any sense, that telephone thing. So there's kind of that. And then the other kind of fancier, shinier thing to toss in is I was talking to Damon a long time ago, and I've been doing new media narrative, digital narrative, locative, augmented reality, all that stuff, 15, 20 years now. And it started out a long time ago when I was a grad student, and I was really into hypertext. And I don't want to crap on hypertext, but I guess I kind of have to, is that you had hypertext fiction, hypertext poetry, and it was fascinating, but you had two things that you found, yay. One of the problems that I kind of found after a while was that that's an amazing group of work, but it's a totally finite set, and like a 2600 Atari game, old school, I finished it, and I wanted to kind of go further, or some were so infinite, but you'd realize how it was working, like algorithmically recursive, that it was just forever, and I'm not going to ever come to the end of that. And that's kind of what led to all the stuff that I did. But But more recently, I was like, wouldn't it be interesting if you could do a series of work that were basically interactive, but the interactivity isn't something on the surface. It's not, let's push a bunch of buttons, or let's do a choose your own adventure. Let's have an internal kind of guts. That's kind of what got this going, because that would kind of invert all that stuff in a way.
Yeah, like Jeremy and I mean, our collaborations consist of we get in bad moods and talk to each other late at night on like Facebook and stuff, and
Exactly.
like glum and like complaining about things. But then we get talking about stuff. Or Jeremy tells stories. You know, so but the idea was there was some interaction, but not interaction in point and grunt, click, click, click,
Yeah.
click, click, click. You have to do stuff like it kind of interact, like that interaction means it really interacts with you in ways it kind of chooses as well. It's not just a responsive, like, no, tell me the story. I mean, you know, like what a lot of early like hypertext things really were. They were about going back and choosing branches and stuff, and you kind of figured it out. You figured out the trick pretty quickly on, so.
So I'm going to add some questions that aren't on my list. So number one, I know, right? Be scared. How long have you guys known each other? And is the, you know, and then on the flip side of that, because you got me talking about how the story is smart, and it's kind of in relative, you know, I would relate it to, and only because bear with me as I formulate this in my head. It's like a smart bot. You know how bots go through SEO and they search things. So your story kind of does what the bots do when they're looking at websites, to kind of push them up onto like page one, or like where you're the first option. But that can always change because the SEO pattern, the bots are looking for different wordings. So your bots and your algorithm are picking, and that's how the story's changing. Yes and no.
I mean, in some ways, like, I mean, like the idea of like the sort of the statistical reinforcement of certain things getting reinforced and other things being diminished, that definitely happens.
Okay.
You could look at it if you wanted to get mathy about it as a sort of a really stupid simulated
Not
feeling
really.
kind of algorithm. So yeah, I saw the everyone recoiled. So pretend I didn't say that. It does computery things, but the or like a neural network or something like that, where the strength between each of the things is sort of reinforced by how the user reads it.
Got it.
So that's really the input into it, is how it's read reinforces certain pathways through it. If you read it through this certain way over and over again, those will tend to get reinforced. But you can then reshuffle it when you choose to break that.
Okay.
That's the trick. So, but it's not like a heavy, like super algorithmic, like looking, like it's not like just looking at a corpus of text and then generating a bunch of pile of stuff out of it.
Okay.
It's really following choices that Jeremy wrote. Like I said, it is one, 100% artisanal, handcrafted words, so every one.
So how long have you guys known each other?
This will actually tie back to the question you were asking earlier, which was about the manifested AR stuff.
Yes.
I met Jeremy through our mutual friend Mark Squarek, who is involved with manifested AR. So my work with Mark, who I'm going to see tomorrow. I was supposed to see him tonight, except I'm doing this.
I'll say hi.
Yeah, I'll say hi. So, so I'll see him tomorrow. But like, he was one of the manifested AR people, and he had collaborated with Jeremy, and I had gotten to know Jeremy through Mark. So I'm trying to remember when we actually, like I kind of knew of Jeremy for a long time through Mark, just because I talked to Mark. Mark's here in Brooklyn, and so I see him, in person and stuff. So I'm kind of up on things he's doing. So I was aware of Jeremy through him. But we've not. This is like the closest we've actually come to. Like, this is like the first time we've done like some sort of big video chat thing. We're normally like just sort of still images of each other. So this is, and we live on opposite coasts. So.
Yeah.
Can I? I'm going to tag in on that, and I've known who he is / was, because you're not dead, so I don't want to say was, that'd be weird. But I've known his work for 4 or 5 years. I think we got really close because I've done a lot of me. Sorry, but to answer the question, I started doing a lot of games where I've done stuff on Facebook. Like, I didn't tell anybody, and I actually wrote an entire novel that I put out as my Facebook output for a couple years ago. And didn't tell anybody till later on. Or I had another one that was called The River Project, and that one actually got written about by Leonardo Flores, the e-poetry dude. And my timeline was a river, because if you think about Facebook and the timeline, there's information everyone's sharing, and it's like these little things on the water as it goes by. But when it's gone, if you don't archive it, it kind of disappears. So I had all this ephemeral crap that I kept sending down the timeline river. And then I got bored with that, and I had a gallery in my photo space on Facebook a couple years ago, just kind of sort of half as a joke. And I actually had one show of somebody's mix-up media artwork out of Oakland, but everyone else was too scared to show stuff on Facebook, so I retired it. But what I did is for a week, I had a clothes sign in an empty room as my profile photo, and that was that, and that was a couple years ago. So the way I got to really know Damon is I've done these events, kind of like the performative art of the 60s, the happenings, where I have these events that are something weird, like what was one of them was the basement behind
Right.
Oh, same thing. Yeah, it was the same name. It was a basement underneath Facebook, and so people would tag in for 24 hours about the sludge behind Facebook. Oh, the memes are leaking, and oh, that group's making too much noise. And after 24 hours, I destroy it, I delete it, and that's when we got tight about 2 years ago, I'd say.
Yeah. All that stuff was very like limited. Like you could miss it. Like you did some of them that were like hours, it seemed like, and like Facebook.
Yeah, one was the life of a certain type of fly, and it was an hour, and that one actually did a countdown, and then we all said goodbye. That one was pretty good, but there's no, so I deleted it. So
so it's lots of like little short, intentionally ephemeral projects, so that they'd come up, and then I could just like jump in on there and start posting random crazy stuff. So and that's kind of how we kind of got talking to each other. So we've both been peripherally aware of each other for a long time. So like like Leo that you mentioned. Like I met Leo at the last, not the last, but actually no, I think he was at the last ELO. I met at the one in Milwaukee, so I remember hanging out with him there. So like there's lots of people that we kind of know mutually in between us. So like we kind of knew of each other. But then we started making. Jeremy would make these crazy short-term little things, and they were fun. But you could just make stuff for them because like they're going to go away in like 5 minutes, So like it was often great. I'd often find out about them like right before they were ending. So that was
and then the biggest one I just remembered. The biggest one was the ghost. So
I remember that.
Yeah, real quick on that. So because I know you've got a bunch of bonus questions lurking behind this.
We do.
Anyway. Another kind of experiment where my degrees, because a little of my background, my degrees are in creative writing. I have a bachelor's from SF State and an MFA from Cal Arts, but my Cal Arts one, I won't talk too long, but I did an installation that was intentionally going to fail as my thesis, and it was a painting that had a broken video with a motor I got from Radio Shack with batteries I had to replace, and it was a story you could never quite read, and it would move on a motor, and whatever you watch was whatever the last person left, because there was actually a scroll of the story behind the images from a video I shot in the desert. Yep, that wasn't the story though. So anyway, so in real quick, so in grad school, my biggest influence was the idea of the death of the author. So it was the idea that if you create something, if you write a book or you make a film or you do a series of photographs or whatever your work is, it's a foolish thing as the creator to go, oh, it's done, and everyone's going to totally get what I meant, because what if the person had a bad day? What if the person has a different taste than you? What if the person just doesn't see metaphors the same way as you? They're going to get something totally different. So that was my thesis. And so years later, I've kind of come back a couple years ago, and one of the things was I wrote a series of short stories, and they got published as an ebook, and they're all about identity and social media, called I'm the Ghost Here. And the title has several meanings. One is that if you think about social media and identity, you're the ghost because you're not the physical person. Like right now, I'm meeting him for the first time, but I'm the ghost here. The digital me, that sort of smear of stuff online me, is the person that he's been friends with, and vice versa. But then I had a publicity page because, honestly, no offense to my relatives, but the flashing 12 on the VCR, like, I don't know how to download an ebook. I don't understand how to hit that little huge button that's all across my screen. I'm like, all right, I'll make a damn Facebook page so you can read my book. And then they don't come to it because they're like, I don't know how to find stuff on Facebook. And so then after a while, I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm going to slowly delete that promotional page. I'm going to slowly make it something else. I'm going to bring people in like Damon, and it's become this weird collaborative thing about ghosts and identity. And after a couple months of it really rocking some interesting stuff, I actually deleted myself, and then he for a while took over, and now this other guy, Gordon Way, runs it. And so I ghosted myself out of my own ghost.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. It's not, yeah. Gordon's another person that I don't think either of us have met in person, but we've sort of run into via these things and have just sort of handed it off to. Yeah, it was just like, ran it for a while and then just sort of put it up for grabs. Whoever could grab it. I let him know I was doing it, so he got there first. So but like it definitely sort of changed and evaporated and reappeared and disappeared and was always kind of precarious, and it always is. So like Gordon could just stop. He it's basically like he's supposed to like crash it into things until he gets bored with it and then hand it off to somebody else. So and if nobody picks it up, then nobody picks it up. So
yep.
Interesting.